Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Certainly, looking forward to getting back on the field with our team next Friday. Always anxious for that, so we're at that point. I think the team's had a really good summer thus far. They'll finish up this week, take a break, needed break, and then hopefully come in fresh for to start the next phase of our preparation. And thus far, the 2018 team's been a really good group to work with. I think they've handled every phase of the program pretty well, and certainly have the potential to be a good football team. So really what's important now is finishing up this week in good fashion and then having a great preseason camp. And like any team, that's a really important thing. Just looking backward for 1 second, we had some really rewarding moments last year. And probably the biggest thing I would note, for this team moving forward, if we're going to take another step, it's all about consistency for us. So we've got to find a way to play with more consistency and see what we can do on that front. Roster-wise, just if you look at the losses, the most obvious loss would be our linebacker core last year. We had 3 seniors that played at a really high clip, and we also had a 4th, Kevin Ward, who is a very valuable special teams player, captain for us on special teams. So we lost four players at that position that did a really good job. Nate Budgett was an unheralded defensive tackle, played well in our scheme. And then obviously Josh Jackson at the corner position. So defensively, we've got some work to do. And then on the offensive side, lost a couple linemen. 2 running backs that were good players for us and a receiver. So as we move forward right now, I think if you look at this ball club, we're a little bit more certainly veteran of the quarterback position. Nate Stanley coming back for a second year. I think the surrounding cast, his receivers and tight ends are a better, more qualified group than a year ago. Yeah, and then in the offensive line, I think we have a chance with enough experience right now to have a good group there. The obvious thing we're lacking is experience at running back, but we like our players there. They just haven't played very much. Then on defense, obviously, the big question is who's going to be our linebacker. Our linebackers will be our starting linebackers, and then depth behind them. And then the secondary and the defensive line, developing depth there as well. And then the other big thing is our punting game was less than stellar last year. And if we're going to have a good football team, we have to take a step forward in that direction too. So all in all, we've had good competition, healthy competition, I think, back in the spring. Expect that to be even better this August with guys that haven't played being, a few months older and more experienced, then adding a bunch of freshmen on top of that. So, it's going to be good to quit talking about all this stuff and get back on the field and actually start working towards the 18th season. So with that, I'll throw it out for questions.
If you have questions, please raise your hand. We'll get a microphone over to you. Coach, our first question is going to come on our left toward the back of the room.
Chad Lice, Dakota Des Moines Register. Nate Stanley, a year ago at this time, competing for a job, now becomes the second junior in your 20 years to be at Big Ten Media Days. What type of growth have you seen from him, and how did that happen?
Yeah, I think that in itself is significant. He is the second underclassman we've brought here, Josie Jewell being the other. And as far as we know, they're the only 2 juniors in the history of the program that have been selected captains after their sophomore seasons by their team. And we elect captains in December. It's a total team vote. So I think that just tells you about how far Nate came last year from being a guy that we weren't sure was going to start in August. At this time last year, we didn't know who our starter was, and really had a good season. But most importantly, he's really gained the respect and confidence of his teammates. So it's great to have him back. He's worked extremely hard, and 2 things you can't give players are experience and confidence. And I think he's been able to certainly benefit from a year of play, and looking forward to good things from him this fall.
Floor is open right now. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We've got one right on the aisle toward the back of the room as soon as we get a mic over.
Scott Docterman, The Athletic. Kirk, you had an experienced center last year in James Daniels who had rare athletic ability. How do you replicate what he can do, and do you have the type of player who can compete at that type of level?
Yeah, really, you don't replicate somebody like that. I mentioned yesterday, I think my entire career, I've probably been around 3 centers that had his kind of ability, going back to Joel Hilgenberg in the early 80s, and coached a guy named Wally Williams in Baltimore and Cleveland that had some freakish abilities too. So, when you get a player that has those kinds of abilities, it's just really rare. The good news for James is his best football is ahead of him. He's 20 years old right now, so he's got a great future, a tremendous athlete, but more importantly, a great young man and very intelligent. Keegan's played a really good football for us very quietly the last couple of years. And when he moved over full-time this spring, he has played that position in the past, cross-trained. He looked totally natural there. So what we're not going to have is a guy of James Daniels' athleticism. You probably have to go to the NFL to find that. Those guys are rare. But we've got a player in Keegan that's, we think, not only a good football player, but also another guy that's really respected in the program. He's a very quiet leader, but a very strong leader. And, that's important, I think, at that position.
Floor is open. Please raise your hand. We'll get a mic right over to you. Next question will be right here next to the camera.
Scott Novak, Leader Publications. A lot is being made about the disparity in strength between the two divisions. What are your thoughts on that? And is the West catching up with the East finally?
Yeah, I don't know about the race there, but, I think the Big Ten, I've been in the league for quite a while now, 28, 29 years, something like that. And it's always been a great conference. That's what I do know. The consistency of what the league stands for, what it's all about, the quality of play, the quality of coaching, the competition week in and week out, I think is really impressive. There was a time, I think, in the 80s where there were a couple programs typically at the bottom that really had a hard time competing. But it's interesting, in my mind, at least over the last 15, 20 years, it's been extremely competitive. And, really, I'm just kind of focused on the 12 games on our schedule. I don't see a game that, we better be ready in each and every one of them. They're all going to be tough contests. And I think that's really the nature of college football right now, but I think it's really accentuated in our conference. There's anybody can beat anybody, so you better be ready each and every Saturday.
Still time for a handful of questions. Please raise your hand. We'll have our next one, Coach, back here on the aisle toward the left.
Kirk, Mark Morehouse from the Cedar Rapids Gazette. You lost a couple guys last year early to the NFL. Do you see that kind of taken off in the NFL, being maybe a little more aggressive with underclassmen, or maybe even that shifting to 2 years in college football?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much documented right now. That's a trend that's rising. I think last year, was the highest number, if I'm not mistaken, that entered into the draft. And unfortunately, there are guys that enter that shouldn't enter. Both of our players, had good choices to make. And, certainly wouldn't second guess, and I supported both their decisions. We've had other guys in the past, Brendan Sheriff, Desmond King, who decided to stay in for their senior years. But that's a decision the individual has to make, in my opinion, unless they're just getting ready to make a bad decision. And we haven't had that case. And to me, it's kind of interesting. In James Daniels' case, James is the kind of player that we typically we're not able to recruit. But fortunately, his brother had a good experience at our place. I think our message resonated with him. And so he came in with uncommon skills and played at a very early age for us. Josh, on the other side, is a pretty unique story in that he was not very highly recruited out of high school, and he started one game going into last year, ends up being a consensus All-American and second-round draft pick. So, when things like that happen, they're great success stories, and I'm just happy for both those guys. They'll both do very well with their respective teams.
Take our next question just in front of that last one, Coach.
Jay Cohen, Associated Press. What does Parker do that makes him successful, Parker Hesse, as sort of an undersized defensive end in this league? And what kind of example is he kind of for the rest of your program?
The first word that comes to mind for me is his attitude. And he caught our attention. He came to camp. He's from a smaller town in Iowa up north. And, we liked him in camp, saw some things about him. He played quarterback and outside linebacker. And then during our first bye week, two of our coaches went up and saw him compete live, and they both came back. And in fact, I talked to them. They were on their way down in the car that evening, Friday night. And both of them were very, very excited about what they saw, just his competitive nature, playing quarterback and then playing defense. So, we're a team that tends to project. We look at guys, that play maybe other positions. And if we think we find something in terms of their makeup and their competitiveness that we like, we'll recruit them and then figure out where they're going to play later on. Parker grew into the defensive end position and, really got thrown into action probably before he was ready. Drew out had an injury, so he had to play a lot in that 15 season. And he's playing against some pretty good players, Conklin in the title game for Michigan State. But he competes hard. It's the thing he does, and that's been a common denominator with him since he got on campus. So, just talked about guys that are really respected in our program. Parker certainly earned that. Everybody on our team just thinks the world of him. He's a tremendous young person and outstanding student, check all the boxes. So, players like that really help you, hopefully have a chance to put a good team together.
Still time for a couple more. I think we have one in the very back of the room.
Kirk, Ross Sternstrom from WWT in Omaha. Talk about Noah Fant. He's one of the best tight ends in the country, and what do you expect from him this season?
Well, if we're going to have a good football team, our best guys have to play their best. That's been a common denominator throughout all the years, and certainly we consider him to be one of our best, and hopefully he'll be here next year at this time with us. If I was hoping Josh and James would be here too. We'll see how that all pans out. But he's a tremendous young guy. We played him a little bit 2 years ago, just try to get him acclimated a little bit and get his feet wet. And certainly last year he had a tremendous season, really took steps, not only as a receiver, but in all areas of his game. And we've seen that continued growth this past spring. The work he did blocking, his attitude's great. Certainly he's more comfortable and more adept at what he's doing now because he's got some experience behind him. And just like everything about him, he's been a tremendous guy in our program. And again, if we're going to have a good season this year, we certainly need players like Noah to have a tremendous year. And I can't think of a reason why he won't, other than he's going to attract attention for sure.
Time for one more question. Okay, Coach. Thank you very much.
Thank you.